Daddy said that really saved was it's the chubby boy from Boulder County. Now we're pretty good enough. But thank you for letting me come out here tonight. I don't have a lot of prepared remarks. You know, I wanted to come out here and basically say, here I am. I'm your sheriff. I'm a firm believer in the right to bear arms. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. And, you know, as it was put up here. So you start breaking that down, and I think about my job as sheriff. It tells me, you know, I wear a lot of hats from time to time. And I've worn a lot of hats over the years. I've been a drug officer. You know, I've worked the streets. I've bought drugs. I've done those various things. Been in charge of homicides and been a major case squad commander. Again, one of the things that I always did, though, whenever it was in Boulder County, that I was just a kid going into law enforcement, I raised my hand and took an oath. It was an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Missouri and its Constitution and the Constitution of the United States. And so, one of the things that a sheriff has really come into light recently has been the Second Amendment, because many sheriffs across the country have basically stood up and said, because of so much grabbing, power grabbing by the federal government, that look, enough's enough. You know, executive orders don't mean squat to us, because we took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Just so happens that's the Second Amendment right there. That's one of them. And so in doing so, it caused some consternation with a few folks. For those of us who said, no, we're not going to do it. It's not worth the paper's written on. Now, let me back up then and talk about the office of sheriff. Office of sheriff is pretty old. Now, with a show of hands, and you won't be, how many of y'all believe that the sheriff was mentioned in the Bible? Ooh, we got two brave enough to raise their hands. Anybody else? It's true. It's true. Daniel 3:2, I believe it was, where Nebuchadnezzar had the image of gold made of himself and wanted everybody to come down and worship, and he had the precepts and the governors and everybody else, and the sheriff. He had the sheriffs come out. Sheriffs go back pretty far. Now, we all know that sheriff is an English word, and that was the King James Version of the word. But what it was a leader. So the sheriff goes back pretty far history, but you really get into the sheriff into England, early days of England when everything is forming. And what you have is you have families. And families would typically live in common areas. They were called serfs, you know, just commoners, common everyday folks. And inside those families, somebody usually ruled the roost. That's just the way it was. At my house in Boulder County, it was Paul Jordan. Now, I was brought up to fear God. My dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, so I was raised to fear God. I was terrified of Paul Jordan, because he would get me right now when I messed up. So, but my daddy, God rest his soul, you know, he died about 11 years ago. And but that was a thing that was ingrained in us, you know, fear God, love our neighbors, and you know, be community oriented. So I grew up in Boulder County, dirt poor, scratching rocks with everybody else out there. I was poor and didn't know it. Running water was in the creek, literally. So people laugh, you know, and say, "Oh, surely he's not that old." No, but we were poor in Boulder County. We were dirt poor. I grew up 9 years old, going out and killing squirrels with a .22 rifle, shooting rabbits, you know, twisting them out of holes with sticks and stuff. That's the way I grew up. But with a fundamental knowledge that that was part of my freedom, part of my God-given rights, that I could do that in a country that allowed me to do that. That was freedom. So, being brought up with guns, the subject of gun control in our family was pretty much, it was one of those things, that's a bunch of BS, quite frankly. You know, you take guns away from law-abiding citizens, who's got them left? Who's left with them?
The hoods.
Absolutely. And who protects the innocent when you take the guns away from the innocent? Okay. You know, they are so much easier prey at that point in time. So I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. Now, again, back to the sheriff. And why is that office important? And why are you hearing more about it today when it comes to this amendment right here? And why are the sheriffs, many of them across the country, defying the president in what he wants to do with executive orders on ban of assault weapons and things of that nature, which, by the way, was scrapped in the Senate today.
Yes.
The sheriffs, going back to this medieval times in England, was basically, he wasn't even there yet, but he was a leader within those families. 10 families bound together. That group called a tithe. That was 10 families, 10 representing, tithe representing 10. 10 of those tithings together was basically ended up being 100 families and formed a ton. Later on was referred to as a town. So you see where that's going. Each one of those little tons had a leader that was called a reeve. He was a person they bore their griefs to. When there was a dispute between Mr. Rust and
Mr. Right.
Mr. G. Yes. Okay. You two had a dispute. You brought it to the reeve, who bore the griefs of both of you, and made a decision. And because you all had chosen him as the supreme, okay, he settles it, that's it. You respected that decision and you walked away. Because I was elected by you guys to make the final decision, and you said through this government that he's talking about, we accept that. Okay, but now, if I for some reason started saying, you know, Gene here slipped me $50, they find out, guess what the rest of the community can do? Throw the bum out. So self-governance brings on better government. Okay, so move forward with the reeve. The kings, and there were kings making up, England. They saw how powerful the reeves were in those communities because the serfs, the common man, the everyday man understood that I can bear my burdens and my problems to my guy, and he will make a decision that I can live with. The kings recognized that. So they said, we need a leader over, when all of these tons bound together, I forgot one word. When all of the tons bound together, and they had the reeves, you ended up with many reeves. And so they said, when they were all bound, it became a shire, which was an early word for a county. So the kings recognized that within those districts, you could have disputes between reeves. So he said, one reeve will be over the entire shire, and he will be the chief reeve. He's the shire reeve. Sheriff. That's how we got to be. And so, you've heard it said before, shire. Well, that's where it came from. The shire. Is literally, that's how the word evolved. And so, you go down through to where I think it was King John in the Magna Carta. He was forced to sign the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta was a document concerning what? Self-governing and freedom. Freedoms, because there was a tyrant, King John, in place. And he was forced. And who in the Magna Carta did the people go back to 27 times with articles listing that this person should be involved in the decision? The sheriff. A common guy elected by his own peers. So you start seeing a pattern here of self-government. Elected by his peers. So here's where we're going today with the Second Amendment. Has anybody heard a lot of the chiefs of police standing up saying anything about the Second Amendment?
Very few.
Very few. Now, do they have a real problem with what's going on? Yes, they do. Why are they not have a big mouth like the sheriff?
Political appointees, most of them.
There you go. There you go. They're political appointees who are departmentalized. Departmentalized. It's no longer the office of sheriff. It's no longer the office is on loan to me from you. Bottom line. An office is on loan from the people to the person that they put in the office. And therefore makes those decisions. If he makes bad decisions, out the door. Plain and simple. So it's representative government, self-governing of the people. You got to be of the people, from the people, lived with the people before you can even put your name on the ballot to be elected. So therefore, that's why you're seeing sheriffs across the country standing up to the executive order, you know, that president was looking at implementing and saying, no. You can write it, you can issue it, we're not going to enforce it. Plain and simple. Because it flies in the face of the Constitution. Now, I've heard troopers and others say, I'll lay my badge down before I enforce it. But what gun are they under? They're departmentalized. They're departmentalized. I can tell my guys, not no, but Hades no, we're not doing it. And my guys will listen to me because I signed their commissions, and and that's how it will happen in Cape Girardeau County. And how it will happen across the country with many, many, many sheriffs. You know, there's over 3,000 of us across the country. And we're not going to do it. Just plain and simple, because it flies in the face of the Constitution, and we took the oath to uphold the Constitution. And so that's it, pretty much in a nutshell, of why, you know, some people were screaming at me in the papers, and I really don't care about that. You know, I was elected to govern. I was elected by my peers, and the office belongs to you. And so when you get tired of me, tell me to get out. I'll be gone. And the thing of it is, that's the beauty of self-governing and of the people. And that's what I believe in. I live and die by the vote. I believe in doing that. And I've always said, long live the office of sheriff, and may he ever, ever be elected by his peers. Never be appointed. Never. Never give up. Never abdicate your responsibilities to your people. Never give up those powers. Never give away the jail. Never give away. That jail is a pain in places I don't want to say. But I'll never give it up as long as I'm sheriff. Because it still is part of the people's. It's your thing. It's your jail. It's your basis. If we give it to Corrections Corporation of America, they're going to run it. They're going to run it different. At least I can make the decisions, and I answer to the folks. And you all are the folks. So that's really what I want to tell you about why I believe so strongly in the Second Amendment. You can take so many examples of gun control and why it is so silly. I heard the one about, you know, the example of, well, you give kids pencils in school, and when one misspells a word, do you take everybody's pencils? No. He's silly. You know, somebody, what next? Somebody commits a murder by hanging someone? We're going to take all the rope out of the work? Sure. Baling twine? Oh, it's gone. Can't use it on a farm anymore. So I harmed someone the other day. When we, as a public, know the personal responsibility, you have to step up. Rules in government are there for certain things. Many times overstep their bounds. I've been guilty of it in the past. Many people in government have been guilty of overstepping their bounds from time. You have to have checks and balances, and a judge comes in and says, you can't do that. Sir, yes, sir. So, none of us are infallible. But when you make a mistake, live with it. Live with it. Learn from it. Go forward. But again, back on gun control, it's, I was the sheriff in this area from Missouri that testified in front of the Supreme Court on concealed carry in favor of it. I can remember when, and most of y'all remember, raise your hands, remember when it was up on the ballot to whether we had the right to conceal, right to carry concealed. How many of y'all voted for that? I went home on Thanksgiving Day after the November election. Sat down with my brother sitting there, love him to death. Well, my brother said, I voted to help you out. I said, I voted against that concealed carry. And I said, you did what? He said, well, you wasn't for that, was you? I said, well, you canceled my vote out. He said, you mean you don't have a problem? I said, I have never had a problem with a law-abiding citizen having a gun. I said, I'm not arresting law-abiding citizens. I said, now law-abiding citizens turn into good people in bad circumstance sometimes, drive a little too fast. Who's ever done that? I don't know. You know, it happens. It happens. But we have laws. There's laws, and most people agree there are people who don't need guns. There are people who don't need them. There are people who have committed crimes and done things in their past, or there's people with patterns of behavior that don't, I don't necessarily trust. Guess what? In the issues of a concealed carry, there's paragraph 7 in there that says, I, the chubby sheriff, have the right to say, you give me bad vibes. You can take me to court, you can have Judge Lipke order me to do this, but because you've got closed record, you got a rich daddy. See what I'm saying? It happens. It happens. And, for that reason, the sheriff can say, nope, I'm not signing. Now, I can tell you, out of about 2,700 permits in Cape County since 2004, I've only done that a handful of times. Less than 5. So I got to have a pretty good reason. Hair on the back of my neck, something going on. I don't like this. I don't like this. Judge can order me to. We've only revoked 2 out of about 2,700. 2 permits revoked. That tells you these folks are law-abiding citizens. We don't have a problem with them. How many people have been shot walking down the street in Cape County from somebody just with concealed carry? No, you don't hear about that. Now you hear about the guy, the ex-military guy that went off the deep end, started shooting up things. Could I or my guys be killed doing that? Yes, we could. Can you legislate against mental illness? No. You can't legislate against mental illness, and you can't legislate against pure OD evil. There are people in this world who are pure OD evil. And they say, oh, that's not politically correct, don't say that. It's truth. There are just bad people out there. If you don't like it, bump it. There are bad people out there. There are people who are mentally ill out there. There are people who are fine the day that they, pass their next check or do this or whatever, and something happens in their life, it's tragedy, and they lose sleep. Sleep deprivation brings you not to think like you normally would think, and boom, off the deep end. I get paid to deal with that. Just like our military is paid to go into harm's way and deal with bad situations. So, but do we penalize the masses for the acts of a few ASS apostrophe S? No, it's not right. You don't penalize the masses for the acts of a few. That's what the president and many in the Senate would have you believe by an assault weapons ban. I would dare say, if you go in and look to see how many people were murdered with a knife versus, not guns, but versus an assault rifle, you'll find that more were killed with a knife. These people have just outdone themselves. Now, I know that's pretty blatant. I respect them. They're Americans. I respect their opinion. I do not agree with it in any way, shape, form, or fashion. That's me. Questions? Yes.
I read a while back that when you register to get your concealed carry license in Cape County, that they are making copies of your personal documents, and those are going to, I think, the federal government, or to entities that will make them available to the federal government. Is that true?
That is a very good question, and here is the answer. I don't know. I'm highly suspicious of what's going on. Lieutenant Governor Kinder is highly suspicious of what's going on. Here's what she's talking about. Back in 2005, shortly after, we had 9/11, we passed the Patriot Act. It's supposed to expire at certain times. Then along comes, we developed Homeland Security. Most of us are packing Homeland Security. But anyway, the Real ID Act of 2005, which is a federal act that basically says by 2008, everybody needs to have basically a universal type driver's license that is agreed to by the United States government that it's acceptable. Well, a lot of states said, there's this thing called sovereign. We're a sovereign state. We don't like that. Several states objected to it. So it was kicked back. Still in effect. Got to do it. Gets back to 2010. Then I think it gets kicked back now to 2013. And this is where her question is coming to. 2009, the state of Missouri passes House Bill 361 and says, we're not complying with the Real ID Act if it involves taking your biometric data to create or comply with the Real ID Act. And so the state of Missouri basically said, no, we're not doing it. The state of Maine said, no, we're not doing it. And so along comes consternation, because when you say no to the federal government, what happens?
No, they don't like it.
They don't send you money, waving carrots, money. You're gonna lose your Homeland Security funds. You're gonna lose them. And so that's where it comes down to. Now, on that basis, what they did is in January of this year, when you all come to me for concealed carry, I do the background checks on it. I send the checks, a person submits the fingerprint to show that they've never been, they got a criminal history. That's not going to forbid you from having the right to carry. You pass, basically an FBI background check and a MULES, which is a Missouri Uniform Law Enforcement System background check, and you pass my local records background check. Those records stay in-house. They stay with me. I'm forbidden to give them out, and I wouldn't give them out anyway. And Mr. Russ knows all about Sunshine Law. We give them stuff under Sunshine Law all the time. But that was one that when the Missouri legislature enacted concealed carry, because of the fact that someday the powers that be that might be in government might say, we want that. So I'm forbidden by law to give that up. So the only thing that I do, I make notification to the Department of Revenue through my terminal, my Missouri terminal, which I have there in the computer, that this person has passed satisfactorily all the requirements. That's it. From there, one little blue slip of paper, they take over the Department of Revenue, that's been it. That's the end of it. Anything that's retained there strictly stays with the Department of Revenue, that little blue slip, and all the pertinent information stays with me. In January, that all changed. They started scanning that document and sending it. Now they say it's going to their department in Jefferson City. And the Department of Revenue says. The Department of Revenue says that. On that machine it says Morpho Trust. On those machines it basically says Sega Morpho. Guess who those companies are? They're companies that specialize in facial recognition, which is biometric data, and work for Homeland Security, the biggest contractor for Homeland Security there is. So do you think we're not suspicious of that? There was a lawsuit filed in Stoddard County, an injunction ordered by the judge there. Now here's the interesting part, and here's where what we have done so far, myself personally. I met with my attorney, Kirk Porter. Do you all know Kirk? Good guy. And what we're waiting on today, Department of Revenue has to file the briefs in as to what their response is to the lawsuit in Stoddard County. The big thing is that when they had the hearing last week, the Department of Revenue intervened itself by motion to be a party of the lawsuit. Now that's a lot of legal jargon. What it means is it said, we're in this thing. The local fee agent was the one sued. But the Department of Revenue representing the state and their attorney said, we're a party to it. It's probably going to get fast tracked to the United States Supreme Court anyway, or the Missouri Supreme Court. So we're going to waive. We're going to intervene in a motion that we're party to it. Now, our belief is, me and my attorney, is that as soon as Judge Mayer makes his ruling, if he says that the Department of Revenue, by waiving and intervening as a party to that, we believe not only will that order affect Stoddard County, but it will affect all of the fee agencies across the state. Now that's our interpretation of it. So we anxiously await that, and in fact my attorney will most likely be there the day that that is argued, because we're going to argue the fact we believe that the order should include all fee offices in the state of Missouri. If for nothing more, then I don't believe the concealed carry needs to be scanned to a company in Atlanta, Georgia. They just don't believe it does. I believe we need verification that they're not taking biometric data unless you waive that right to that. If you as an individual, now the law was not written that way. The law was not. But if a person, under this Real ID Act, the whole thing was to try to prevent what? Terrorism. So now the federal government does have the right, because they control certain departments, TSA, airports, the cruise ships that break down, you know, the terminals, a carnival. Well, it's not been much of a carnival lately. So they literally could say, James not getting on the airport, don't like the way you look. This man here, they can say, no, you're not getting on the boat, because we have the authority. You don't have a real ID. What they're probably going to do is they're going to delay you. You might miss your airplane. You might miss your boat. They'll probably let you on, but you're going to go through a bunch of grief. So, the Missouri legislature didn't leave any waiver there at all for people who travel a lot and say, you know, I travel so much, I'll give up the waiver on the biometric data. You know, if that's what they got to have. There's no waiver there. And so right now, the way it sits, we believe they've taken biometric data. And so there go, that's why the orders, you know, we're asking that, and guess what? Anybody know Rob Mayer? When that bill passed the House 2 years ago, well, actually, it's longer than that, in 2009, Rob Mayer was the pro tem of the Senate at the time, and it went through 32-0 in the Missouri Senate when that bill passed. That said, we're not going to do anything that complies with the Federal Real ID Act. Rob Mayer is the sitting judge now that's in Stoddard County that's having to hear that case. So he's probably not taking very kindly to somebody that looks like, it just looks blatantly like they're trying to circumvent the law. So anyway, but again, that's getting a little bit off of right to bear arms and Second Amendment. But those are some things, and it you know, goes back to what her question is. That's what we're doing in response to it right now. And we're very hopeful that the judge basically quashes that thing until it can actually be heard in court. And at that point in time, it may be tied up for months with basically a permanent injunction until court date. So,
Sheriff, I'd like to ask you a very redundant question,
yes.
because I'd like you to emphasize it. Who within the federal government, state government, county government, or city government do you report to?
You.
Exclusively.
Exclusively. I report to the county, I do report to the circuit judge. I send him a report monthly, which is copied to Roger at the collector's office and the county commission. But I answer to the judge because I am directed by the court, by court order. If I don't have a court order, typically don't get done.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, freedom of the press. It seems to me that recently, within the last 10, 12 years, the press only reports to us what they want us to hear. They will emphasize if somebody is shot by a gun, but if he's killed by a hatchet or a knife or anything else, we hardly hear about that. There's a little bitty article in the paper on page 9, but if he's shot by a gun, it's the headlines, and the news media and everybody else, they're reporting the same thing. So my question is, how can we go about getting the true statements of how our state is doing, and rather than relying upon the news media, whether it's newspaper or radio or TV or whatever?
You know, I honestly don't know what the answer is to that. What I can tell you is this. How many of you noticed that the sequester nonsense is what I'm going to call it. And all of a sudden, the press, who's been in the tank for the president for some time now, just gives him one little dart, change his opinion. The press is powerful. That's why, Mr. Rustin, sometimes we disagree on sunshine. But in truth and reality, sunshine, you let the sun shine in, You know, we like to hide it on certain things like rape victims, other things of that. We like to hide it when it comes to your daughter, an accident, and there's grotesque photos. We think certain things are just, should be protected. You know, so we might go have a few differences in there, but open press